Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 155. I'm Ignace and today it's Blueprint Day. The Heracles is complete and we're doing a tour of the ship. It's not going to be a super detailed tour. If you've been watching the build up to this point, you don't really need a super detailed tour. You've already seen most of it. And if you're grabbing the blueprint, there's plenty of room for you to explore and kind of look around and see how things went together on your own. You don't need me to natter on about it for half an hour. So we're just going to give you the basics, and then the blueprint link will be in the information box below the video. So go nuts with that. Essentially, this build was supposed to be a really big ship. For the sake of being a really big ship, is not necessarily supposed to be the most efficient or effective way of doing anything. It was just an exercise in building big, and once we got the basic structure in place, it became an exercise in asymmetrical building. Obviously, as you can see, it's not by any means the same on one side as it is on the other. It's very different. And also, towards the end, it became an exercise in cosmetic building, adding things to the ship for the sake of making it look more interesting, even though the things that we were adding didn't serve a specific functional purpose. I'm pretty happy with the way that it turned out. It is a carrier. It is designed to carry a lot of ships. I think the comment that I put in the blueprint page, the description on Steam, was that you'll run out of friends before you'll run out of room to hold their ships. It's kind of the idea that we're going for. The hangars are large, and there's more than one. This is the main hangar here. This is meant to be accessible for both hover vessels and small vessels, and you can store quite a large number of them in here. We've got some markings on the floor, just some really basic symbol markings. Just as a point of reference, if this was just a great big gray slab, it would be a little bit difficult to gauge size and sort of figure out exactly where there was room to put the next ship, or how much room you might have had left, just trying to put it together at a glance. So we've got these markings inside to help with that a little bit. We've got some guns inside. Because this is an open hangar design, I wanted to make sure that we had some sort of defenses inside the hangars to prevent unfriendly people or AI from parking in the hangar and just making a mess of your ships, or boring a hole into the core, through the hull to the core, without some kind of opposition. So we've got 4 minigun turrets basically standing on guard inside the hangars to prevent bad things from happening. We've got these pods that are kind of built into the hangar walls, and they're most readily identifiable by the orange elevators leading up into them, and these are how you would get into the main part of the ship from the hangar. They are defended by turrets, the little turrets that are meant for shooting people and not ships. There's at least one in every one of these pods, designed in a way that you're a sneaky guy trying to get into the ship, and you come up through the elevator and you come around the corner and blam, turret in the face is basically the design there. We've got 2 more pods. We've got one here and one here, and again, it's just allow you to access the interior of the ship from the hangar and vice versa. We've got this open section that I envisioned as a way to get from the repair area, which is over here. You can see this is the repair block, neatly outlined with the square there. If you've got a ship that needs repairs, you can plunk it there, and then you can kind of move forward. And if you want to go forward into the main hangar section, you can do that. And if you're piloting a small vessel and you want to bring it up into the upper hangar, you can do that as well through this open area. You can just kind of scoot on back here and do what you need to do. We've got the large capital vessel spotlights throughout the hangar to give it a little bit of illumination at night. The ship is so large that it causes performance issues. The game slows down rather considerably with this ship in view, so I didn't want to go crazy with the lights, but at the same time, being able to see where you're going is kind of important, so I did put a certain amount of attention into lighting the hangar areas just to make things a little bit easier for you. And then kind of gilding the lily up top here, we've got some more turrets. I think these are plasma, either plasma or pulse lasers, and another thruster pod here all by its lonesome. And I say another because the majority of the forward propulsion for the ship, forward and reverse, comes from this assembly down here. As you can see, we've got a lot of thrusters aimed at making this ship able to accelerate in the forward direction as quickly as possible, given its size. I will warn you that the generators are just barely enough to allow forward movement with all of these thrusters going. It peaks out at about 101%. If you're moving forward and sideways at the same time, it goes up to about 127%. So you may wish to consider adding some more generators if you're going to be using the ship a lot, just to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I was considering adding more myself, but I decided that there was going to be some renovations involved, and if that was to be the case, then I would be just as happy leaving it to the individual user to decide what they wanted to do, whether it would be boring into another area where there's room to stick some more generators, adding on to an area, expanding an area, whatever you want to do. There's the option to do that. Remember, just because you built it from the blueprint doesn't mean you can't change it to suit your personal preferences. And then we've got, this is basically just all outer hull stuff that's here for the purpose of looking more interesting than it would if it was just great big gray slabs everywhere. Pretty much anywhere where you see black and green is purely cosmetic, and the reason why I did it that way is because I liked the idea of having black and green on a ship, and I think it came together in a way where some things are really gaudy and pointless, and some things actually look really neat and are pointless. In between, I kind of arrived at a happy place where I was satisfied with what we had done, and I didn't really feel that it was necessary to go back and make everything perfect, because it's very, very subjective. We've got most of the detailing for cosmetic purposes is on the sides and the top, but we do have a lot of extra armor that I added last minute on the underside of the ship as well to protect the sensitive insides of the ship, which we'll get to momentarily. You see, we've got some more thrusters here built into this little pod, forward and reverse. We've got this whole section here, which is your, I guess these would be starboard lateral thrusters that move you in a leftward direction. That's the way to describe them. As you can see, there's quite a few of them. There's 14 on this side and there's 14 on the other side as well. And then everything around them is all for the cosmetic purposes. Anywhere where you see these tanks, these are actually good for storage. You can actually use these to store things if you really wanted to. This one's got 9 slots worth of storage. They were never intended to be used as storage, and if you try to use them as storage and you need to get to them when you're on a planet, it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt. So I would recommend that if you want to be cheeky and hide things in them, like maybe extra weapons or something, ammunition, whatever you might need if there was a pitched battle around the ship, might not be a horrible idea, but only in space. Don't count on being able to access them in gravity, because it's kind of a pain in the butt. Same with these things over here. These are all actually functional elements that you can use to heal certain status effects, but their position on the ship was just meant to look different from other things that we were placing on the ship. Kind of bizarre in a way when you look at them, the way that they're placed. There's this exact same kind of equipment in the utility room inside the ship, so if you need access to this equipment, especially in atmosphere, it's available to you much more easily than this part here is to access. If you're in space and somehow you ended up with some sort of weird status effect, these are pretty accessible from the outside of the ship and they could be used for that purpose. So they're 99% cosmetic, but they do have that functional element. And then we've got guns, more guns. We've got some satellite dishes that spin around and do funky things when the power is turned on. We've got these blocks which are cosmetic. I think these power storage blocks, yeah, they have storage as well, 7 slots. But again, intended for the cosmetic and not for the functional. I've used a full complement of turrets on this ship. You cannot add any more turrets to the ship based on the rules of the game as of this moment in time. And the idea is to provide defense. It's not an offensive kind of ship. It's too large to be offensive. Well, depending on what you mean when you say offensive, but it's intended to defend the ship because they have to be spread out in order to provide coverage on the ship to such an extent that they wouldn't be as effective as they would be on a smaller ship where they were closer together and you could get more focused fire, more overlapping fields of fire. I did the best I could. But just fair warning, this isn't going to be the kind of ship that you're going to be using to run blockades or anything like that. If you've got a lot of really heavy-duty, hard-hitting small vessels in the hangar, that's a little bit different, provided that you've got people to crew them. I guess kind of makes an important point. We've got some cosmetic antennas here attached to the front of the ship. We've got the ubiquitous artillery turrets. We've got 2 of them, one on either side. I don't really see a lot of use for artillery turrets on a ship of this size personally, but they're there if you want them, if you want to go after some stations, some AI stations, or even some player control stations and keep out of the range of their weapons. These might be a good solution to help you do that. We've got all our fixed barrel weapons in here. I thought there were more different kinds of fixed barrel weapons, but the only ones that I was able to find were the pulse laser and the missile launcher. And they're arranged in such a way that when you fire them, they fire in a pretty tight group. So you're rewarded for accuracy if you hit. And if you hit consistently, you're going to do a significant amount of damage to whatever you're hitting. If you're having trouble hitting, these don't have the spread on them that would allow you to be successful anyways. You kind of have to be doing a bit of successful aiming and predicting where your target is going in order for these to work as well as you might like them to. If you don't like that setup, it wouldn't be too horribly difficult to modify this opening here to give yourself a little more space to spread the weapons out, or even move some of them out of this area altogether and put them elsewhere so that you get a spread instead of a concentrated fire pattern. If you're having trouble hitting, that might give you a little bit of damage instead of none if you're consistently missing with these guys. We have, actually this might be a decent way to sneak in through here, through the turrets. Very front of the ship on the interior is sort of like a gunner's cockpit. You can sit here and you get the view directly out from the center of the turret groupings, or the barrel groupings, I guess you could say. And this is the very end, the front end of the ship's interior hull, which is entirely made out of armored glass, with the occasional exception of some pieces that were made out of combat steel just because of the different shapes that were involved, and I didn't want it to look like we were standing on armored glass as part of the walkway. So anywhere there was a walkway that had to be at a 90-degree angle like this here, in order to make it work and allow us to place the door and do all the things we wanted to do, it's combat steel, but everything else, as you can see, is armored glass, and it's designed in such a way that it's all in a great big long straight line. And in fact, that's what we're going to do, is we're going to run all the way through in this great big long straight line. And the doors, when the power is on, will open for you, obviously. But the whole idea here is that you'll be able to run from one end of the ship to the other without having to veer off and go around something because we built something in the way. This is the main bridge, by the way, or it's intended as the main bridge. Very, very simple, very utilitarian. If you want to decorate it, go nuts. And this arch here is, again, supporting that idea of being able to run directly through without stopping. There's LED panels all throughout the ship, this especially, or specifically this central tunnel, that kind of give you a little bit of a hint as to what's in the various different areas. So if you're looking for fuel storage, or the botanical section, or the utility room, which is directly up from here, the LED panels, when they're turned on, will tell you. In this case, utility room up, says that right there, and then central bridge is this way, aft access, or the back of the ship access, is this way. And we have another long straight tunnel, and that's because directly above us is where we have the compartments. That's the utility room, and I think this is the storage room, ammunition storage maybe? It's been a while. We've been working on this ship for some time. Yeah, ammunition storage is up. We've got central bridge, aft access, utility room, botanical module that way. Just designed to give you a little bit of information while you're familiarizing yourself with the ship. Oxygen storage is down. We've got each of these glass sections. You may have noticed the reason why we have so many doors is because they're designed to be compartmentalized. If one takes damage, you don't have the whole thing decompress, which is kind of handy if you're taking fire and it's getting through the hull into the glass areas. You can have a little bit of extra protection, a little bit less likely that you're going to run into problems with decompression, running out of oxygen, suffocating, that sort of thing. And you can see we've got the ventilators down here doing the little spinny thing. Continuing towards the back on this straight line tour, more LED panels, indicating that we've got fuel tanks. There's lots of fuel tanks on the ship, enough to keep the ship going for quite some time. Looks like when the fuel tanks are full, the ship has about an hour worth of fuel for full thrust forward and to the side. So basically the maximum possible load that you can put on the thrusters you can do for about an hour with the fuel tanks full. So that's not horrible for a ship of this size. I would consider maybe if you're using the ship on a regular basis looking for an alternative to add even more fuel tanks, just because that's my personal preference. This area back here is where the existing generators are stored. And again, I didn't go crazy with the decoration in this back area because as far as I can tell, these things produce radiation when they're operating. And I'm not really a super big fan. We have God mode on so that I can navigate a little bit easier here while I'm showing you guys all this stuff, which is probably why it's not kicking in, but you get the idea. We've got 8 of the large generators, the tier 3 generators. It wouldn't be hard to find room to add more if you really wanted to get rid of that power issue when we've got everything firing at once. And then we get to the very back and you can see we've got some of the large, extra large thrusters that are part of that back section. The interior took a while to build, the exterior took even longer, and one of the things that's important to note about this ship when it comes to the defenses and how much faith you can have in its ability to take a beating before it starts showing signs of falling apart is we've got this great big long armored glass central area, and then we've got the inner hull, which is sort of indicated by these bulkheads in the walls that you see, and then we've got more hull plating built on top of that. So in this, oh, and the RCS units. It's for its size, it's actually fairly nimble. It does its thing pretty well. I'm kind of happy with it. Just keep in mind that if you're taking significant damage to this area of the ship, to keep on top of repairing and replacing RCS modules as necessary if it comes to that. We've got this armored glass central section. It's not going to take much of a beating before bad guys punch through it. Then we've got combat steel, all combat steel, and this sort of outer hull. And then we've got a layer of combat steel sort of built over top of that. There are sections where it's 3 and even 4 layers deep, depending on where you go and what's going on. And the whole idea, again, is to add that extra layer of protection. You can see here another example of the different layers coming together and doing the things that it needs to do. It's a pretty beefy ship. Given that we haven't sort of announced where the core is, it wouldn't be necessarily difficult to find, but the chances of an enemy just very, very easily coming along and punching through the hull of the ship and causing problems for you, pretty slim indeed. You'd have to be basically away from the keyboard to let that sort of thing happen. Overall, I don't see myself ever building a ship this large again, just because it took a very long time. It's not entirely practical, but it's fun as hell. And I would say, in your case, whatever it is that you're looking for in a ship, if you're prepared to keep up with the upkeep, either by supplying your fuel by not necessarily survival means, if you catch my meaning, or if you're just looking for something to tool around in with your friends, this is not bad. I would say give it a shot and, you know, see what you like and what you don't like and make some modifications if you like to do that. The next episode, we're going to be doing a bit of a cheeky little build. I'm not going to give too many details on it now, but suffice it to say, I think it will go over well, especially for those of you who have been working through this very, very large build with me for 25 episodes or so now. To see something a little bit smaller and a little bit more concise might be kind of fun. And the build after that is going to be pretty wacky and kind of interesting, I hope. I'm hoping that it's going to be that way. We'll find out for sure when it happens, so if you want to be notified about the next and future videos in the series, as always, you can subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video, and in this case, again, the blueprint link is also in the information box below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.